full screen anymore, but whatever. Let's talk about 10 DevTools features you are not using, or it might be less depending on how much time we have. But you actually could be using them, so that's good. So hi, my name is Hablich. I am a product manager on the Chrome team. More specifically, I work on debugging and testing web applications, so that's what I'm thinking about. And I have the honor to work with products like Chrome DevTools and Puppeteer and so on and so on and so on. But today, I'm mostly going to talk about Chrome DevTools, so only about the debugging side of things, mostly. I also have my esteemed colleague with me, Wolfgang Bayer, who is a software engineer on the Chrome DevTools team, and he is going to take over parts of the talk. So if you see us switching seats, it's not because we want to run away, but we actually are switching seats. Yeah. Yeah, there's also my email there and my Twitter handle. Feel free to send me something. Like a PayPal request or something like that with money. That would be nice. Please don't send me feature requests, because for feature requests we have something else I'm going to disclose at the end. Okay, so in general, yes, Chrome DevTools, that's what I want to talk about today. And Chrome DevTools is like a Swiss Army knife, like this thing here, right? So it has many unknown tools, and it also has this tool. Anybody knows? Raise your hand. What this tool is about? You have been in my previous talk. Yes. Okay. So you excluded. So, any guesses? Like this? Yes. Okay.
I heard once that you can use the military for a grenade. Is that true?
For what?
Okay.
I only heard grenade and I was like, wait, what?
Maybe it's never, I never tried it, but if you deactivate the grenade and you haven't thrown it, you can't deactivate that stuff.
Okay. So that's cool. I would be surprised if that is going to fit into this pin thing on a grenade.
This escalated quickly.
Yes. We're recording this, right? So no grenades here at the Sentry office. No. So this thing is, yes. By the way, we're going to have those prompts all the time during the talk. That means this is the interactive part, because we want to be a little bit more interactive, because it's already evening and, you know, sleepy and so on. And I think you had some beers. Okay, so we passed that interactive part. Yeah, it's for this. It's actually a hook for bags. So if you have those small shopping bags that really try to slice up your fingers, you use this thing, and it's super nice, because with that you can easily hang them. Or you can also pull through ropes and stuff like that. So yeah, as I said, now I'm going to make this connection again to DevTools. So my hypothesis was DevTools is like a Swiss Army knife. So this is this knife with all the tools exploded, and I don't know if we can identify each of them. And this is DevTools, and they're the same. And that's how approximately it would map. Like there's this knife that's pointing to the sources tab, because there you can slice and dice the code. There's the hook. Where's the hook actually going? Oh yeah, it's going to override, because you can pull through changes and stuff like that. But Wolfgang is going to talk about that a little bit more later. Yeah, so Swiss Army knife, and that's how we are going through that. And let's first start with a few features to tame complexity of your web application, obviously. And every time when you have a question, simply raise your hands and ask the question right away, because that's probably the most efficient thing you can do. Or ask me later, or Wolfgang, when we eat pizza. I think it was pizza, right? Yeah. Hot dog?
No.
Okay, also great. If you are not vegetarian.
It was hot dog, but we had a problem now. But we're gonna have a vegetarian.
We wrote the hot dog, but pizza was the place. So.
Right. So, okay. Sorry, I got distracted. So that's going to be the pattern. I'm going to present a problem, and then I'm going to present a solution in DevTools how you can actually tackle that problem, or at least make it easier for you. So problem, where is my code? So if you open DevTools and you have the page explorer, that's the page explorer. And it shows you a mesh of artifacts. And with that, I mean, you actually see the code that they wrote. No, let me switch that. You actually see the code that is deployed. That means that the code that the browser actually sees. That is JavaScript, that is minified and chunked, that is HTML, that is CSS, and that's sometimes also WebAssembly. Well, and if you have source map set up, I'm not saying set up correctly because that's a different challenge. But if the source map set up, you're also going to see code that you wrote, hopefully. And it's going to be meshed together in this on the pages there. That can become quite confusing, in particular if you have a big web application. So yeah, there's a new thing called offered and deployed view in DevTools. It's still experimental. Why is it experimental? Because it's not finished yet. But you can use it. But we are still iterating on the actual design. What it does, it actually separates the mesh that you have seen, like you have the source map files in there and you have the deployed files in there together in the same tree. It slices them in the middle and actually presents them in this both views. And you can enable that in the settings. That's nice. That's cool. So now we're going to go to the next feature and then we're going to combine them a little bit. So let's assume that you want to make fixes in DevTools and you need to copy them over to your source repository, Visual Studio Code, Vim, Emacs, Notepad++, whatever you're using. You could be using a lot, but I would prefer Vim or Visual Studio Code. Yeah, and that sucks. Because it means every time that simply is going to interrupt your flow when you're doing debugging. So let's assume your source maps running up and running, and you actually deep in this debugging session. There's a better way of doing things called workspaces. So workspaces there's this page tab that we talked before, but next to it there's this nice little tab called File System, where you can add workspaces, which works very similar as you have seen in Visual Studio Code, for example. So you can add local files in your file system, and it's going to, with source maps, it's going to try to map it to a local file system. So if you make changes then in DevTools, the changes are going to be written back to the file system, and without more reloading, it's automatically going to work if everything is set up correctly. Yeah, that's cool. That's nice. So that's the thing. Now it comes to the interactive part, because why not? What if we turn those two features up to 11? So now some time for mocks. And with mocks, I mean mocks. It's like we cobbled them together a few days ago because we actually want to improve the offered and deployed view. And I would be very interested in what you think about those things. Okay, if you assume right now, offered is showing you what the source maps are telling us, which often might be a lie, but actually what you want to do is you actually want to work in a local file system. So let's assume you're going to see here your local file system. And up there, you see what the browser actually sees, like the old view. What would you think about something like that? If this is too complicated, that's fine, because it's like
really good that I don't care about what the browser sees.
Okay, that's good. That's okay. What is the okay? Yes. So the offered view might be the thing that you're interested in.
So if you're coming to code editing in the DevTools, which admittedly is not very common from what I've heard.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to see individually what the browser understands and what they see from the source map and what they see from the file system. But I would like to see how this syncing has succeeded and how it had failed. Maybe some folders were resolved from the source map to the file system and some were not.
What would you do with that information?
Well, I know what to edit and what my expectations are set correctly. What will So if I edit a file that has successfully resolved, I know that it will actually be saved in the file system.
I see. Okay, so if you are editing a browser, you actually want to know if the action that you're doing is actually succeeding or has any chance of success.
Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly, if I could have my file system mapped to the work in it, I don't care about the top part.
Okay, so that would be with the file system actually added. So this is like from that example. Is it that app? Maybe not. I'm not sure. That's from my app, and that's from one of our UX designers, I think. So that would be something like that, where you actually have the same workspace as you see it in Visual Studio Code in here, essentially.
To be frank, I have seen some very, very rarely, but in my years I have seen some bugs that result only on the compiled code. So in this very, very, very specific case, which is rare, it was a bug in back when we were using Webpack. What was this? The minifier. So it was some very, very specific bug, and it was producing the same identifiers for different variables.
Yep.
Which of course will make problems. For this very, very specific case, I would need to have both.
Right.
But this is very rare.
So,
and even if it exists, it will be fixed, like the minifier, the
right.
uglifier, I should say.
So we identified a lot of edge cases, like you, for example, mentioned, but I didn't want to prime you with all the information because I want to get your fresh view. Yes.
So I'm not a web developer, which makes me the one that edits through the console and expects to see down everything. But when I do this, and I do this very rarely, I would kind of expect to see this synchronization the way this I mentioned, maybe in a colored way, like Git does with various IDEs. Coloring would help me know this is a local change, this was for a file system or not. So maybe that kind of experimental feature could help things at least visually distinct.
Okay. Okay. What would you do with that information?
I think he said the same thing. Manage expectations. Like I will know what's in my source code now and what's not, so that I at least don't commit half-assed work.
Right. Okay.
Can you remind us what the original question was?
Yeah, I was also thinking.
Yeah. So essentially, when you it was this thing. It was still this. So all of those features are actually interconnected a little bit. That's why we put them together. It's like you have the code that you wrote, which is, for example, TypeScript or C++ if you want to deploy the WebAssembly, or a mix of all of that, or whatever templating code. And then you have the code that actually is deployed and the browser sees, which is different. It's JavaScript, HTML, CSS, WebAssembly. Yes, that's all of it. For now. Yeah, I mean, with WebAssembly, it's going to be hard to add yet another layer or more. And it's super. So those are two different views. And actually, when you typically when you debug, you probably are more interested in the code that they wrote, and you want to debug that because that's code you can reason about. You're going to have a very hard time reasoning whatever your bundler is going to do with your code. So that's the premise. Okay, how can we make that easier? And there's a lot of pitfalls there. That's what we're trying to work through. So that's the original question. We want to make debugging easier, essentially.
I might be wrong, but I think you said something like, what would you think if what you see in your DevTools does not match the change you made or something to that? What you prompted the discussion with. That's where I'm
right. That is that thing. It's like we also have this workspace feature where we actually can map to local files, and then you can make changes, and the changes are then going to be saved. It makes a lot of sense to use both of them together because then you have a nice experience, and that's why. Okay, what if we really are going to go all into that? And that's where how the mocks were created. Like, okay, let's try them out. Let's see what people think about that.
So it works flawlessly. You do it as in a perfect world. You do the stuff locally. it's reflected in, or the workspace is connected with the local, is
Yes.
reflected in the code.
Yeah.
And that question was, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I have a concern.
Yeah.
You started
So
with it works flawlessly, so then it's also
Yeah. Source maps. So might be the one thing that's going to break.
My concern is, so there seems to be a lot of effort going into this
Yeah.
to find where is your code.
Yeah.
But my question would really be, where are my extensions? Like, I don't really like to edit in the Chrome DevTools because I don't have my link tools with me. People are starting to use Copilot. They don't get it in DevTools. So I'm wondering, is it worth the effort, or is it really something that you want to go down the road? Given that people will prefer Copilot probably if they start typing something?
That's an excellent question. And also something, it's like, it depends a little bit because a lot of people have different development flows. So we have seen, for example, we did research and people are using, for example, Visual Studio Code first and also for debugging. But also the opposite is true, like they're really developing in DevTools. And we have a big user base, and that means we need to cater for a lot of them. Having said that, a lot of those things to actually make that work is going to help. That's the assumption also for other setups, because it's a lot of backend things that need to work properly. Like, for example, actually together with Sentry, there's also an initiative going on to make source maps, let's say, more predictable and how they behave. That's also coming out of that, like, okay, how can we actually make that more stable in general? Yeah, this is simply one of those things, a little bit more visual. But it's actually, yes, there was a question there, and then let's move on. Was it there?
I found that it's mostly when I use the editor in the DevTools, it's when I would edit CSS. Because you are already in the browser and you want to see the result, and you don't have a very concrete design, and you're fumbling around to bring it to what you have in your mind. And then it's very helpful after you've changed so many different styles of different nodes, XML nodes, to just have it already saved. Otherwise, you need to manually copy, paste everything and not forget the parent container. To bring it over to VS Code or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is a good case.
I think Wolfgang is going to cover a little bit of that, right? Yeah, okay.
Wait for.
Yeah,
wait,
okay,
we'll have
great.
something.
Great. So yes, CSS editing is also one of those cases where we actually see a lot more people doing CSS editing in the browser and not in the IDE. Yeah, okay. Yeah, one.
You mentioned a couple of times WebAssembly. So the source map that would also magically work, like if I have a Rust source.
Oh my God.
That it shows the source from the WebAssembly.
Yes, but it's complicated with WebAssembly because source maps and WebAssembly work, but there's like a few problems with that source map simply can't do. Well, a few things that source map simply can't do, and that where the experience most of the time is not going to be as great as with JavaScript. That's where the dwarf debugging comes in. We can talk in the break about that in particular, because WebAssembly is like very different beast debugging wise.
Are you sure you don't want to change your mind and tell all questions at the end?
Yes, no, I'm going to move on. So yes, another thing that's coming out, like tame complexity. Now let's switch gears a little bit. Let's assume you have third-party resources all over the place, like I have here versus node modules. Typically, you don't want to hopefully debug into that and see that in particular and so on. It's wishful thinking. Sometimes you need to, but most of the time, hopefully not. And then you get nice stack traces like this here. Very nice. You're going to pay a lot of friction and mind power to actually make sense out of that. So what I can do is, like, there's a feature in DevTools called ignore lists. And how does it work? The page tree that I've shown you before. You can right-click on any folder or file and then tell it, hey, add it to ignore list. Then it's going to be grayed out. And it's also not, all the files and everything in there is also not going to show up in the stack frame call stack anymore. Sorry, call stack. There's also patterns you can put into settings, and so on and so on and so on and so on. The cool thing is also, your framework might also already be pre-filling this information. I think that's the case for Next already, and also for Angular. Might also already be for Next. I don't know. I would need to check. But for Next and Angular, I'm quite sure. And then you don't need to do anything, because then it's simply going to automatically work. And that's actually the best thing. Because if you require a user, a developer to actually do something manually, there's a very low chance it's actually going to happen. So it's better to do everything automatically. Yeah, try it out. It's great. I use it daily. So, one question there. Let's assume you have this ignore list, and you use the feature break on uncaught exceptions. Who knows the feature break on uncaught exceptions? Okay, yeah, I've heard. That's good. So what it does is it breaks the execution on uncaught exceptions. So if the JavaScript engine throws an exception and that exception is simply running through and never caught, it's going to break. It's paused execution. You get this nice paused execution in debugger. I think that's the overlay or stuff like that. And it can start inspecting variables and stuff. That's what it does. It's like this general, oh my God, if something goes wrong, tell me about it. In those situations when you click on this panic button, more or less, would you expect to also break in ignored code?
Yeah. How do you define ignored code?
Like comment it out or?
With this?
Black box.
Yes. So essentially you're telling it, I'm not interested in anything in mode notice. If there's an exception that's uncaught thrown in there, I don't care. Or do you care? That's the question.
I would use it, I would ignore it because I don't want it to be caught or catch uncaught exceptions. So I would actually make use of this ignore list to get rid of these exceptions that I don't want to see. Like some crypto library is constantly probing something and throwing uncaught exceptions. Now I would have a means to actually get rid of this part at least. I would use the ignore list.
Okay.
For me, it depends. If my code calls the library code or the ignored code, then I would want to see the exception because it's uncaught and my code breaks because of it. But if it's from the framework or something that like where my code isn't involved at all, then I would want to have it ignored.
Okay.
If your code calls the framework exception, or if your code calls the code that is breaking something, then your code will fail as well. So in that case, the exception will be thrown in your code.
Exactly. So that's my thinking.
Just throw it.
There's nothing we can do about it, even if the DevTools tell us that some library is throwing. If it's throwing in the source code of the library, there's not much I can do other than go to GitHub and complain.
I mean, you can do an override and try it out. You can do an override and try it out, and then you can file an issue. Yes, that was also a question.
You can also put a application.
If the package, if the node module is my organization's module, I would like to know where it is breaking, because then I can go to the team and request them to fix it for my use case. But I don't want to debug that, so I want to ignore that code.
I see. So you want to get notified, hey, there's a problem, but
send an email.
You can't do anything about it anyway, except telling somebody. Okay, I see. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I need to move on. I have a nice matrix for that particular use case. It's like, oh my God. Last week, very interesting conversations about that.
Does it tell you or it doesn't? Does it tell you or not?
Right now, it does not.
It does not.
But there's also the option to actually do that for cases where you're actually interested and you could be doing something. So that's what we try to find out. What is better? How, or if both is good, how can we notify the user what is happening?
Or at least there should be a way to click through the stack trace or call stack and see that code from the ignored part and inspect the variables. But not break on the exception, but when there is a, like, if I am the consumer of the code, if it breaks on my code, then I can go back and check and say that, okay, what failed?
Right.
You cannot inspect if it doesn't break.
If my code does not break, then I don't care.
Yeah. Okay. That's a bold strategy. Okay, let's move on. So, alternative to console log. Problem, console log is great, and I really like console log. And a lot of people like console log, which is fine. The thing is that it requires code changes. And you also obviously need to redeploy those code changes. Because if you add a console log statement, like this is from our changes tab, it's a change in code. And afterwards, when you're done debugging that thing, you hopefully are going to remove all those console log statements. There's actually also console debug and a lot more things, so console trace and so on. But yeah. Instead of doing that, you could also use log points because they don't require code changes. And they handle like breakpoints. So what it does is like, you do them like breakpoints. You can add them, add a log point, and what it does, it logs like a console log statement to the console without requiring code changes. You can do that on already deployed code without changing the code, deploying everything. You can really try out bug fixes, for example, for that, or if you want to analyze something in your production system. And then afterwards, of course, they're not persistent, so afterwards they're gone, and that's good. Yeah. Similar to conditional breakpoints, you can add expressions in there, whatever you are interested in. I think as long as it's side effect free, right? I guess so, yeah.
Can you save them if you want?
They automatically saved cached.
So if I refresh, they're still there.
Yes.
It's kind of a different.
Like breakpoints, it's complicated when you reload the code and it changed. Then DevTools tries to make sense out of all that thing because you set a breakpoint maybe here or a log point and your code changes, so that's moves down there, for example. What is going to happen? It also needs to migrate that. So it gets more complicated.
But I mean, if there are no code changes.
Yeah, done. Yeah. So other thing is also live expressions. You can also be doing that instead of scattering console log statements all over the place. You can also add a live expression here in the console panel, which is essentially like a watch variable, but a little bit more visual. So this is, for example, this is global and leaky code. Yeah, that's something I tried out with the memory panel. So ignore that name, but it's more like you can actually observe what is happening with your variable all the time and see it live in the console, which is useful in a few cases. Now talking about the console. Like, for example, you're hacking stuff in the console and want to get the currently selected element in there. You can do that with that, for example, if it's updated, or if you're using jQuery, for example, there's also something handy in there. Or there's also $0 on, I think it goes up to 4 or 5. It's 4, maybe it's 5. We would need to check to select the last selected elements, the last after the last selected element, and so on and so on and so on. So essentially, you can repeat the same statements in the console without requiring changes in the console statement to get to different results. I just noticed that the screenshot doesn't make sense. It should actually be, the example doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, it should actually be something else. But I guess you get the gist. This also works in snippets. So if you don't know about snippets, that's another hidden DevTools feature in here, snippets. It's like little code snippets you can save in there and you can execute. For example, hey, do some transformation with the currently selected elements that you're interested in. And they're saved in there and you can use them on all your websites throughout all your debugging sessions. So, how much time do we have?
I think we're actually out of time.
Okay, then let's move on.
I have set the timer. You have
No.
3 seconds.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
Then let's go. Yeah, sorry. Then I'm going to skip over a few questions.
I mean, we did the Q&A already in the session, so I think we can take some more time.
So let's move on.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel, for not giving me time to talk here.
You're welcome.
My name is Wolfgang. I work as a developer on the Chrome DevTools. And this team is located in Munich, but I'm based in Vienna. So speaking here is my excuse for working from home this week, which is great. And I am going to talk about, changing what's live means making edits not to your locally hosted stuff, but now something that comes over the network. So I think this is one error that people frequently encounter. You're trying to fetch some resource from elsewhere, and it doesn't work. And by now, we all know this is a coarse error, cross-origin resource sharing, which I always forget, but this time I looked it up. Unless the remote resource has the correct headers, you won't be able to fetch it. In my previous company, this would mean I would have to go to either the backend team or the infra guys to set up the server and
get some headers.
Yeah, set up the headers correctly. Sorry?
You just accept all of it.
They can also do that.
Yeah, you mean me telling them to? Yeah. Basically, that's usually what it boils down to. But I'm blocked in the meantime until they've made their changes. And now there's a new feature in DevTools where you can modify headers locally, play around with them, and figure out what you actually want, which values, and then only then go to your backend guy and tell them, hey, I want this header.
And they say no.
then it's a different problem. Then it's not DevTools' problem, then it's your problem. So we've been thinking about which use cases there might be. If you have any interesting ones, please come to me after the talk. I would be very curious to know. So there's a bunch of new headers that I listed here are mostly security-related stuff where you have different origins and stuff like that, mismatching. What you need to do is, if you go to the network panel, and I've realized in the back it's probably hard to see. So network panel, you click on an individual request, and then you go to the headers, and you will see the list of headers. And nowadays, since I think 2 weeks or 4 weeks, so with the previous release, this is the new feature, you will see a pencil icon there. And once you click on it, you can edit headers or add new ones. So in our course case here, the magic header is access control allow origin. Usually not the askers, but just to make sure that it works with any origin, you just add that header, click refresh, and Chrome then pretends that this is the header coming from elsewhere. Yes?
Do we have to do that for every request that is sent for every different request, or does it remember the origin and does it work?
Very good question. So here you can do it individually, but there is a link which takes you to JSON-like object where it says which request and which headers are overridden. And if you place your asterisk there in the right spot, it will apply to multiple headers. It also does some kind of not quite regex matching, but you can do some
wildcards.
Yeah.
You're
can
making
use one
two of
case.
my Chrome extensions obsolete with this. Very nice.
Yeah, my top voted Stack Overflow answer is regarding how to when you have this course issue, how to work with it. And the answer is that you download an extension and you do it. Speaking with the button guys.
Yeah, we had an RFC out for that, and one of the extension authors commented on it, and there are still use cases that we cannot cover and they can cover, but they were actually happy and not afraid of their. Yeah.
Were you the extension author?
Pardon?
Were you the extension author? That
No. I think it's just a go-to tool sometimes when you exactly for the stage when you know, okay, the course headers are not set yet. Eventually there will be, but you already want to continue working. So that's a very powerful utility there. Very nice.
Without the extension, you have to wait until the button guys fix it, or to find a way to do it locally. And this with the extension, just you get working.
Or you write a proxy who doesn't care, fetches the data for you, and you speak with the proxy. That would also work. But
Yeah,
there's
not
just
anymore.
workarounds.
Wasn't there also a flag to open Chrome with bypass?
Insecure.
Yeah. But I remember that being a bit
I
unreliable.
don't
This is
know
10
about
years
that
ago.
one, yeah.
Disable security flag.
Sounds great.
Most of the things about the previous session and this one, do you have any .workspace files where we can share these settings across the team? Or, for example, these override headers would be useful when we are executing test cases across different environments, and like we don't want every developer to go ahead and copy paste it.
So we don't have the notion of a profile or a project file in DevTools. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Like something you can actually commit to your Git repository and share it with the team, right?
Yeah, like VS Code has VS Code workspace file that you can share across the team, and when you open that workspace, the recommended extensions and everything is by default for that workspace only, right? So similarly, these changes, it would be great if you could share this with the team.
It's not. So it's not the first time I hear about that, and I would love to get feature requests about that on our issue tracker, because it's like one of those things that might actually be valuable.
For this feature, there's no automated way, but those overrides are saved to your local disk, and you have to specify my overrides folder. So if you copy the files there to your teammates person and they specify this as overrides folder, it will work, but it's not like, it feels like manual carrying the stuff. But yeah, you can make it work.
If it takes from the code, like the workspace file system, then it is better. But this is also useful when we can write a script and automate it as setup for the test case.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's good that there is a folder where we can keep.
But then it will need to be somehow, if you have it in the repo, how does it reach the browser that you're debugging? So I guess if you're using Webpack or Vite, it has to read it with some plugin and feed it in there when you're developing its component.
Yeah, you still have to do some manual configuration. Yeah, you want. Yeah.
Which defeats the purpose of it.
Well, it works for me, one person.
Works on my machine.
Let's move on. So yeah, this feature was header overrides. We've had for a long time local overrides, which means which does the same thing basically for content for your HTML or JavaScript or CSS. Michael was talking about workspaces before, where you basically have the website running locally, and then the changes are synced between what you do in DevTools and what you have on a disk. This is the case for the case where you cannot have the website locally. You're trying to debug someone else's website, or for whatever reason it doesn't work locally. You can still click on each file. If you right-click on it and save for overrides, it will save it to this folder we just talked about on disk. You can make your changes locally, and then if you refresh, it will take your local changes instead of the remote one. So it takes, I don't know, 99 files from the remote origin and the one you have been overriding, and click the local copy of that. And something else, if this is still too cumbersome for you, and I think this is a match to what we've been talking about before, you've been talking about before, you've been experimenting with CSS changes locally and like trying different values. This is also how I debug CSS, because I don't know, it takes a magician to know what you're doing there, and I'm not. There is the changes panel, which is kind of not super obvious, but it collects all the local changes you made. So if it's just a few CSS changes, you can go through the files that are listed here where you have changes and manually copy them over. It's not, it's easier than trying to undo and remember, but it's not as convenient as if you were using local workspaces. And I think this is the last of my slides. The interactive part is Michel's again, right?
Okay.
I think it's probably about the workflow people are having. Or
right.
Do we even have time for
We don't have time for more interactivity. We exhausted our interactivity today. And I'm very grateful about that. So I'm also just discussed with Rob. I'm going to cut short because food is waiting. And we will probably continue sometime in the future. Yes. Problem. How to reach a DevTools team. So if you have an idea, like for example, the project files, or you found a bug, or you have an opinion, we are listening. But how do you do that? Yeah. The best way to do that is finding a bug or issue in DevTools. It's like, there, report a DevTools issue. That's when our bug tracker opens with the right component set, and then it goes right into our triage queue. There's a very high chance if it goes right into our triage queue that somebody for the DevTools team is actually going to triage it. And with a high chance, I mean a very, very, very high chance. Or we have this RFCs, request for comments process since half a year or something like that. So where we send out on Twitter and other channels, hey, we have this problem space and we want to make those changes. Please tell us. Like, for example, how we did here with overriding HTTP response, for example. We also did something with breakpoints recently. And I think we're also going to do something regarding the topic we discussed today with the mocks, with offered and deployed and so on. Yeah. So there's also a QR code going right to that particular RFC repository. Very good way to actually get high bandwidth conversations with us going. And if you want to know more, that's a QR code, I hope, to our documentation, at least the last time I checked. Hope nobody switched it out. And with that, thank you very much from myself and Wolfgang. Happy debugging.
Oh,
Now the internet can hear you as well. You're good to go.
perfect. Hi guys, how you doing? So, any one of you already used something like ChatGPT? Right.
Never
Never heard. On the scala of 1 to 10, how much is it already like driving you nuts? Nuts?
Where zero is.
No?
You mean
Yeah, define the scale.
the tool itself or the vibe around
The vibe around it.
Ah.
Yeah.
10 is the maximum. 10.
7-ish.
Yeah.
I muted on Twitter.
Sorry for everyone that's for who it's on 10, but it's not that much about the ChatGPT by itself, but something more around. So a quick intro about me. So I'm a full stack developer. I'm living in Vienna with my beautiful wife and small baby child. We are expecting version 2. So looking forward to it, October. And yeah, happy deployment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It will be a very my wife expects a very natural release, so it will be pushed via FTP. No hospitals at all. So let's see. Yeah, I love TypeScript and React, and I'm also trying to do some SaaS solo foundry, whatever. So I think I'm a big thinker, not in the sense that I'm a big thinker, but I think about big things. But also I'm also a procrastinator, and I have a pretty strong imposter syndrome. So I always tend to think that people will dislike what I'm talking about, and there's always something where you find some errors in what you are talking about. And because I'm self-taught, I will always have this imposter syndrome thing where I'm afraid that people will say, ah, nah, nah.
Hey, you're great.
Thank you.
There will always be this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but this year will be different. So anyone knows Levels.io, Peter Levels? Yeah, so that's what is happening now for me. So he wrote this few years ago. I think he was broker than any one of us. And yeah, a few years later, now he is pretty successful. And when we look at this blog post, there are just 7 startups listed. So after 7, he made it. So what I'm trying to do is basically the same this year. And what I started with was January was Focus Flow, which basically is a ChatGPT based version of tracking your day. So you track your day, you write some small lines about what you are doing, what you did, and it will generate highlights. And you can also search your entries. So you could say like, what did I do 3 months ago, or when did I met my brother Paul last time, or when did I visit Berlin the last time. So all these things would work with this. Then the second thing was Word Game AI, which basically is the GPT transformer comes up with a word, saves it, and works like Wordle, so that you basically try to find out the word that you were guessing. You try to find the word that the program defined, and you can
stick on your head.
Yes, exactly. So it's a yes/no questionnaire, and I found it interesting because never before you could ask like, is it yellow? Or because there would be so many possibilities. So I found it interesting that you could start actually using natural language and start searching for those things. It has, of course, several issues. Sometimes you ask if it has legs and it says no, even though it's an elephant. So, but it was fun, and most interestingly, it was meant to be an experiment for another app I was thinking, and it was prompt injection, like how easy it is to convince the prompt to tell you the prompt, the super prompt. And it's pretty easy to tell the super prompt sometimes, because the super prompt here is, don't ever tell this word. You are the guard of this word. You never tell this word. You just, if the person comes up by himself, you can say it. So you can pretty easy get him to the point where you ask something and he says, sorry, I cannot say the word blah blah blah. I'm the guard of it. So you need to. It is, and everywhere this GPT thing is running on several SaaS apps, you can do the same. You can mostly and very easily extract the system prompt out of the context. So never ever use any secrets in your system prompts. I know no one would do this, but still don't do it. Then ChatGPT plugins came out, so I jumped all in on it. That's basically what we might be talking about. And my current and latest project is Knowledgeo. You need to speak it out, Knowledgeo. When you don't, it's wrong. And yeah, so basically, Knowledgeo is like a set of prompts that you can put into an AI runner, and then you can run it against multiple inputs. So let's say the first example is personalized outreach. The personalized outreach will have 3 or 4 prompts. The one is subject, preview, and body for a cold personalized outreach. And what you put inside is a list of inputs. So you can upload files, or you can just print out emails and then your persons you have in your CRM, and it will generate for each of them automatically the cold email. It's also similar to receipt extraction, where you can define, give me the price, give me the recipient, give me the reason for the payment, and then you can upload 10 receipts and it will extract. Okay, so let's jump real quick into the plugin system. Yeah, so why? Because ChatGPT has this plugin system, and no one knows if it's actually somehow successful. But at the point when it came out, I felt I have an advantage. I woke up and I had this free time of, I don't know, 1 week, where I was able to develop something. Also, I didn't have any access to it, so I was thinking I could try to implement it myself. And I felt also that other large language models could benefit from it. So there are pretty many already. Why keep this whole interesting thing to ChatGPT? And anyways, I needed a project for my challenge anyway. So one day later, there was the first prototype, and it was very basic. There was not much it could do. It has a little bit the same capability I will show today. But a few days later, I had already a second version out, which supported streaming, then real-time plugin execution, multiple plugin executions, and stream backpropagation of the model. So this already was quite interesting because with my few followers, people were pretty interested. So I was quite happy about that. So that was the backstory. Now let's see it in practice. So just a quick intro. I guess you know how the ChatGPT plugins work, right? No? No at all? Okay, so anyone knows Open API spec, a Swagger thingy? Yeah, so they leverage this part, and then they leverage, or not leverage, they invented this small spec that's the AI-plugin.json spec. There's an example out there. You can look into it. You see this .well-known part. This is the one that contains the Open API spec and the AI plugin spec. And that's the one that you would take and put into the library of ChatGPT or other systems. This on the right side looks is the AI plugin part. So there are some small information about how to integrate it into the ChatGPT. The most important thing is the description for model, because that's the one that is being used for the system prompt to tell ChatGPT how to use the plugin and how to call certain things. Of course, it contains the API endpoint, which you will also use to understand what kind of calls it can make. So this is the Open API specification. So it contains basic things that we know already about. It's the endpoints that you can post to or get, or and the parameters you can specify. And I'm not sure about that, but I think that in most cases, the whole spec is somehow minified and integrated into the ChatGPT part. So because sometimes it can grow pretty big. Some companies have it thousands of lines. Sorry about that. And this will reach any limit. So it's pretty hard to guess how they are doing it. But in general, there's this library of plugins that are available only for ChatGPT. And then there's some internal functionality to interpret prompts and understand when to do what. So while the thing is completing the answer to the prompt, at some point it stops. It says, okay, there's a plugin or something. I need to call it. So there's some interpretation and understanding to do something. And that's basically the fun part. That's what I was focusing on, because when you have this Open API spec, when you have the AI plugin spec, you can use it however you want, because it's an open spec. So all those plugins that are in ChatGPT library, you can use by yourself. Not always, because sometimes they have this weird authentication mechanism. So there would be several approaches how to accomplish that. So first one is the agents and manual interpretation. Anyone knows LangChain AI? LangChain? So let's see if I can find it. Where's my mouse? Yeah. So LangChain is a library for things on top of OpenAI, and what they basically are doing is wrapping it around and enabling multi-prompts that are running in a chain. So, for example, you have here a demo of how the ChatGPT plugins work with their abstraction. So you can load this plugin here, and then they have this multi-step thing where each of the steps is an individual prompt and doing its own thing. And then at the end, it combines it back together. This is basically how it works. So you have this agent executor chain, and then you have this question like what t-shirts are available in Klarna, and because you have the plugin loaded, there will be first the thought. So this is a separate prompt. I need to use the Klarna API. Then it decides to do a specific action. That action is called plugin Klarna product, and then it basically calls this plugin, puts it back into the chain. Then there's this observation prompt that is specifically useful for understanding how the thought action looked like and what the response was. And basically, it will do it over and over again. And there is one, so basically, it is highly extensible. So you can compose those chains, but they are very independent. So when you think of this prompts and this transformer as a brain, this will not run through the brain by itself because it will have all those things have separate prompts. So you are doing a lot of manual work, a lot of human work. So because you are trying to understand what things to do, then you are deciding with if-else clauses what to call. So you're doing a lot of manual steps, and you are taking the functionality from this pretty sophisticated model out and think you can do it better. So it is impossible to generate a single response experience, which I can show you here. So this is my version and the ChatGPT version. So when you are asking it, for example, the initial prompt was, can you please put clean kitchen and buy some milk on my to-do list? So this would not work with the previous version here. But in this case, this one thing is completely managed by the transformer, because it generates each token, then it calls the plugin, it gets the response, and it's responsible for continuing the requests. So the large language model handles it all and is therefore able to understand, okay, I need to do several things. First, I will do that, and I will do that. And in the end, I can tell you, okay, I did those 2-3 things. If you would do it manually, it would always be a little bit weird. That's also what I had with the first version of the plugins, that I did somehow parse certain things, then I called the plugin, and I did some magic, and I put it in, and it was always that the model seemed pretty confused. So the model can handle it all, and what I did here was basically that you can specify some start and end tokens, and whenever they come, you specify some stop words so that it stops while streaming the content. And as soon as it stops, you do the plugin call, you put it at the same position where it was working, and you continue with the same context, basically. Just a real quick intro, because it might be a little bit too overwhelming. I will not go into transformers or tokens deeply, because it's also not that clear for me. But what in my head is happening is when you type ViennaJS is, it will generate one token after the other. And what is also happening is that it generates only one token, and then the next part, it takes the token into the context and does it until certain things happen, like stop words or limits of tokens. So if we do something like this and say ViennaJS is an, we can, for example, inject certain tokens, and it will seem for the model as if it's his own. So we're just completing several things for him, and if we stop at the end, inject this awesome, it will continue and think it's basically like it would be itself. So the solution for the whole situation is finding tokens that we can parse, because then we can do something like this. We can stop at certain things. We can parse it. And we can do something in between, like calling plugins if necessary. And we can inject responses at the position where the model stopped. So this is an example prompt where I use like a pipe start pipe example. And I also use on the right side the basic definition to stop whenever the stop happens. So when he starts to respond, it will say something like, here, there's an example, sure, let me check the availability, and it's putting the start thing, and at some point there comes the stops, and it will stop responding. Then you can call the plugin, put the response back, and let it continue. So let's look at an example real quick. So here, for example, can you read it, Paul? So ask ViennaJS is. So this is basically how the streaming works, right? It's a token after token after token. Nothing special.
This is going over the internet now?
Yes. Let's say, no. We can have a quick look about this. So there's nothing special here. There's just this part where we use generators. So this is my way of understanding the streaming of tokens and leveraging the generators, which is pretty nice. And I think that generators in general gets a renaissance after OpenAI's ChatGPT and in general a large language model, because the streaming is like a great way to use transformers. Let me check. Now, regarding the UX, when we have this situation where you start streaming certain things and then plugins get executed, you want to display some kind of loading indication. And for this, there's this question, how to basically use components while you stream text to the client, and how to show sometimes loading and change the state while you are streaming content. So you are streaming word by word. At some point, you want to show, okay, I'm now loading a plugin, and while you continue streaming, you change this the states. My idea was to transform special tokens into React components, which would look basically like this. So let's say we are in this generator, and we are piping out the tokens that we get from OpenAI. So basically, we are just piping them out. And as soon as we see there's this plugin call, we just yield the whole call plugin, ID plugin, blah, 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 then ask the plugin, and then we call another call plugin complete. It will be shortly clear what this is doing, but in general, while we are yielding our content to the front end, at some point, the front end will get the string called plugin. So what do we do with this? And a solution is to use the Markdown to JSX plugin, where we define some overrides, and Markdown is this plugin is capable understanding basically the MDX logics that you have JSX syntax. Sorry about that.
Unplugged. Oh, no, it's done.
I know. Yeah. So, but when we stream those things, what happens here? So, sure, I can definitely. So, here was the question. Because I wanted to show you, I forgot to write down what thing comes first. So there's this other part where I say not ask, but ask plugin. Please check if ViennaJS.com and ViennaJS.org is available, and the available ones add the available ones to the to-do list, so I can remember to buy them. So let's see what he comes up with. So sure. So first of all, you can see, sure, I will check if ViennaJS and ViennaJS.org are available. And he is doing now my syntax thingy. So the prompting work. So he's doing this domain checker, domain ViennaJS stop. And the stop caused it to not continue. And now I didn't implement the plugin. I will respond to it. But in this case, it would call the plugin, and I would call false, for example. I'm sorry to inform you that ViennaJS is not available. Now, he is continuing to understand that he needs to basically check for the other one, because we had this other thing. So it's asking now, show me, like, call the plugin for ViennaJS org. So I say, for example, true. And it says, good news, the domain ViennaJS org is available. I have added it to your to-do list so I can remember it. I've added it to your to-do list so you can remember it. And when we added notes to this task. So this is already wrong, but in some examples, it would correctly run the additional request. So the code for this one is actually pretty simple. It's a little bit hacky, but it's using this thing that I was mentioning before. So it's some basic prompt, and I instructed to use those things. And I defined some basic plugins that it can use. And so it's a recursive function, because basically what it's doing, it's just getting the response from the OpenAI, and we are streaming it straight to the std out. And if it includes the start, we know that we have a plugin going on, and here we basically start over again. This is a very basic example, and this is the other one that is currently running on play.chat plugin.app. And there are some further thing here. There's who wrote at some point like interpreters and parsers and compilers with C. Well, we will not do this here because I did it with if-else clauses like a noob, but it works. So because sometimes the tokens come like this. So as soon as while the tokens come, as soon as it somehow starts or looks like a start, I get into a buffer and then start buffering the thing until a stop comes. And from there on, we can transform it into a plugin, output this plugin thingy. And at some point we yield this plugin complete thing. And then we continue where we left off. So basically it's a recursive thing. So that's again here the prompt. Can you check for me ViennaJS org and ViennaJS.com domains? So this happens calling a plugin, and then the UI is doing some loading, and then at some point it does done calling. And great news, the domain ViennaJS is available. What actually is happening here is the whole thing is a component, and it is holding an ID. The prop if it's loading, and then the name of the loading. And based on the fact if it's loading or not, it decides what to show. And so I came up with the idea to, while it's streaming, you can put this in a context that's holding the ID. So whenever we do yield this call plugin with ID something, it will start loading, and at some point after it's completed streaming, it will yield this call plugin complete thing, and this ID1 will cause the call to the context to say, okay, ID1 is actually loaded, and we can toggle this plugin that was already injected before from calling plugin into done calling. And the fun thing is that this plugin, this component actually renders null itself. So in this case, I think that components are a great for changing state during streaming, because the alternative would be, I guess, to yield some JavaScript, parse it, I guess, and then not sure how we would do this, but just yielding a component that then can change the environment is the easiest way, and pretty type safe if you use, for example, Zod or something like that. So you can just put a component, and using this on-mount functionality, like with use effects, you can leverage the idea to have an encapsulated way of executing code that was streamed from the server. And you have also the functionality using the context, where you can trigger certain states for another components that are inside of this. So how is this whole thing useful at all? So why would someone need it when ChatGPT can always leverage its size and build better plugin system? So I think that it's worth, because there are a lot of different large language models already, and they are here to stay. And I think that all of them might, if we keep going this direction, and it will not destroy the humanity, and if it will stay safe and legal, then we can leverage it to use external functionality. So that's why I think that my implementation could make sense outside of ChatGPT. We can use it actually outside of ChatGPT, for example, in KnowledgeGeo, because you can, while you are running parallel prompts, you could, let's say, call it to generate external images. So you could call Midjourney or whatever while it's generating the completion. And what I think could be also a great use case is plugins inside of native software, where you can actually enable it to execute certain actions for you. So let's say you have some disability and you cannot do certain things. It might be great to use voice and tell it what to do. And before the developer would need to understand or maybe parse the output of the model. And in this case, it would somehow transform it into actions so that it executes those actions on the software. But if you integrate plugins, the large language model would be able to understand it by itself. So it would make it a lot of easier. Cool. That's it. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Question?
I have actually two questions. Can you, somebody just spend some considerable time with this. Can you name like one or more ChatGPT based software that you were really impressed with recently? And the other one is there something from the open source software which is connected to ChatGPT that you would really like to have, but that doesn't exist?
Okay, the first question. So I think there are some internal software, and I also like it in, like, if you include, for example, the Copilot in it, then I would say that that's a great thing. And I think that every software that is leveraging the functionality to understand human language instead of generating human language is a great application, because the generating application, the generation will at some point lead to a lot of spam. So everything will lead into spam, and people. There are also things that I believe that we might distinguish between, like with food, bio and non-bio, where people will get a sign on the website, this is free of ChatGPT generation. But so I love the capability that it understands us, not that it generates things for us. And those things I really like to use. So like the example to understand raw data and then parse it into structured data so that we can reuse it. The second question was if there's something in open source that I would like to see, right?
Yeah. Is there something you need now for your project that doesn't exist and that you can go define to the web?
I don't know. No, I think there's everything out there. So if I go into, I think there are a lot of open source language models also that you can leverage and use and fine tune by yourself. all this all this infrastructure around Python and the machine learning. Most of it is open source. So I hate that OpenAI is so closed source. Yeah, but still, that's how it is, right?
We're a bit over time, so maybe one last question, and then I'm sure you can ask Lukas after the talk.
How do you handle the GDPR compliance? Like if you have many SaaS projects and customers type in private information, or I don't know.
I tell them basically.
Is it enough? If you
Yeah, they can. They don't have to use it, and they need to accept it. And if they don't, it's free for them to leave. It's
remove the
it's
data. Under GDPR, you're supposed to send, if they ask to be able to provide what you know about them and give them a copy of what you know.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Can you do this?
Yes, I would do it manual.
So you would ask ChatGPT, what do you know about this client, and then.
You mean this one? No, this is no.
Because it can't remember if the session is saved. So in this
I
case,
actually cannot tell you so much about it. So this gray zone, and I am pretty open to it because for me it's.
This would slow you down, obviously. Like thinking about.
Yes, of course. So I'm expecting other people with more interest in this area to focus on it and then tell me where I'm wrong and fix it. And I would pay money for this, obviously, but this is not my focus. My focus on the positive things and like this experimentation.
What's the expression? Something like the last questions later or something. I don't remember how it goes.
No.
Like,
But I think we can continue with Lukas after. I think we need to cut it short now. Thanks again.